Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh in association with Seymour's Lochray.
I was in Tuam.
It ranked fairly highly. Two teams that went at it. I suppose when you walked away from it, probably everything that Lochray wanted early on, they actually did. They got the great start, got ahead. Even the second half, when Thomas had the breeze, 2 points into half time, you thought, okay, Thomas are going to come. They still held a 2-point margin for long exchanges, went to 4, and then Thomas came with the goal and the point. But look at what you'd be saying after that Sunday. Would we love another game? Of course we would. Often replays can be totally different, so that's what Sunday's intriguing again.
In terms of scores, though, that was some equaliser.
Oh, it was.
It was ballsy, wasn't it?
It was. Tiernan Killeen is a lovely hurt, but even the creation of the score, you know,
there was a calmness about it.
The two, Brian Keary to Neil Keary, the right thing at the right time, and this is in the injury time in the county final. But look at, you can say of Thomas's 2 scores, Éanna Burke's goal, Éanna Burke's point to put them ahead for the first time in injury time. Look at, these are quality hurlers playing at a high level. And I think the stadium as well, this resurfacing job that has been done, it's the best surface now in the county that we have. But mother God, with the weather we have this week, I hope it I hope it improves, and I hope it isn't like it is here this morning on Thursday morning.
We were quite lucky on Sunday because we got that window of nice weather in the afternoon in Tuam Stadium as well for the provincial semi-finals, and one man who was there commentating as well on the Connacht GA stream, who looked at Mike Cullen stumbling over the line against Strokestown, is Mike Finnerty. Mike, good to have you with us on the podcast. When all was said and done, what did you make of Mike Cullen getting through to play Turlestrane in the Connacht final?
I suppose, Ollie, the first thing that struck me was it was like watching a different team than the one that had come to Castlebar a couple of weeks earlier and trounced Westport in the quarterfinal. Strokestown from a very early stage set out their stall. They raced into that early lead, and I think we realised fairly quickly then Mike Cullen were in a proper match. Now you have to factor in David Wynne suspended, Niall Welch hurt in the warm-up, Peter Cook just came in off the bench. So there are three regulars that, when all is said and done, will be starting, you'd imagine, later on in the season. But having said that, Strokestown's work rate, tactically very well organised, and they really made it difficult for Mike Cullen to play the sort of football that dazzled against Westport, and that, we're still down here trying to figure out how that Westport team were absolutely hockeyed by 13 points. That has cut deep. That has left to a lot of introspection, I can tell you, about the standard of Mayo Club football. But Strokestown probably played on that a little bit. Everyone talking up Mike Cullen. Nobody expecting Strokestown to obviously pull off an upset. But I can tell you, like yourself, Ollie, you're 26, 27 minutes into the second half on Sunday in Tuam. Neither side has scored. It's level. It's getting tense. The crowd are getting anxious. I mean, all bets were off. Now, I did think Mike Cullen had the job done heading into the last couple of minutes. They were 7-5 up. It looked like they had weathered the storm. And then back comes Strokestown again and bring it to extra time. So overall, my impressions, Mike Cullen, the bar dropped from the performance level, obviously, against Westport. Sean Kelly is a phenomenal footballer. That was brought home to me yet again with his performance. And I still think Mike Cullen will be hard beaten because they have got their warning now, and obviously they're still standing.
And I suppose, Mike, we've seen it, haven't we, even in the club championships in every county this year. But how big a factor is that week turnaround? I mean, probably Mike Cullen, no matter what they thought going into the Westport game, didn't expect the performance that they gave. Then you're 2 or 3 days sitting on that. Then you have to get up again for the next challenge. Is that a factor?
I think it has to be, Sean. Yeah, I mean, the pitches are so heavy now as well. You take out David Wynne, you take out Niall Welch. You're down 2 serious hitters, and no matter what lads say as well in the build-up or to guys like me and you, the reality is they're hearing and seeing the talk around the place. Mike Cullen nailed on favourites, not just to beat Strokestown, but to win the Connacht Club. They've been talked up, as Ollie said earlier, in the same breath as Kilmacud Crokes to maybe go out of a crack off in All-Ireland. It's in Tuam. I think it all sort of fed into this thing of, look, by hook or by crook, we'll get this done. And Strokestown coming in under the radar as well. No county title for 20 years. Very little known about them, with the exception of the Comptons and Sean Mullooly. They're really an unknown. And before you know where you are, you're in this battle, this arm wrestle, and the weather took a turn for the worst. They're kicking wides, they're dropping shots short, and everyone started to get a bit anxious. But I keep going back, the more I think about the game last Sunday, I keep going back to Sean Kelly's tour de force. You know, when Mike Cullen were on the rack and when they were really struggling for inspiration and to break the line and to get scores, Sean Kelly stepped up, won frees, drew tackles, obviously put away the goal in extra time with a fantastic finish. So I think Mike Cullen can thank Sean Kelly for that superhuman performance. And I'll tell you, Toolers will have his work cut out putting Sean Kelly back together again for the Connacht final in a couple of weeks' time, because I think Toolers clocked up more mileage than anyone last Sunday in Tuam. He was more out than in anyway, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the James O'Toole, of course, the much-travelled, much-mileaged physio for Mike Cullen and for many other sporting organisations in this side of town. The fact that Mike Cullen very rarely play in Tuam Stadium, I thought was a factor as well, Mike. They clearly weren't used to the surrounds as well as they would with Pearse Stadium. So they've only played 2 games there in the last 3 years. So, I mean, I'm sure that probably played a little bit into Strokestown's hands. But even from a Roscommon perspective, I wonder, were the Roscommon people a bit surprised at how good Strokestown were?
Well, it's funny you asked that, Ollie. I was parking up in Tuam myself on Sunday, and a couple of Strokestown lads swung in front of me, and I'll tell you now, they were bullish enough. I said, "How are you feeling about this, lads?" And they were sort of licking their lips. You know, the Rossies have a great sense of confidence about them anyway. They certainly do when they come to Mayo. I'm sure it's no different when they go to Galway. And they kind of said, if we turn up, you know, something, we might surprise a few people. So I think they were quietly confident. But I do think you're right about the Tuam Stadium factor as well. I mean, we saw, again, going back to that Westport game, we saw on the wide open spaces of Castlebar, Mike Cullen stretched the game to the max. You know, they pulled Westport out to the wings. They took the ball into space. They love to play it fast and wide. Whereas Tuam on Sunday, it was tight, it was heavy. Strokestown got a lot of players back behind the ball. And Mike Cullen loved to come down the middle, got driven down the middle on Sunday. They were sort of ushered down that central channel by the Strokestown boys, and then they were ambushed and turned over. So I think you're right. Pearse Stadium, drier day, better conditions. Mike Cullen would be much more confident of getting that done without the same sort of stress. But I think the weather, the tight pitch, and the way Strokestown got into an early lead, you know, it all contributed to what unfolded, which was ultimately an hour and a half of an absolute dogfight.
Of course, they'll be back, Sean, in Pearse Stadium in 2 weeks' time. So you got the hurling replay next Sunday.
And then you have the Connacht final.
So Pearse will be getting a lot of action.
I suppose the other thing that we'll be happy though with, lads, is that in a game that went to extra time, am I right in saying they still only conceded 2 points from play? In the whole game.
Minutes,
so, and Mike, you referenced like where we're at now, weather-wise and everything. The big thing is if you can stop goals, but if you can keep your scoring rate down, it's a major help, isn't it? Like,
yeah, there's no doubt. And Mike, what was your opinion, by the way, while Sean references their defensive capabilities? I mean, the goal for me that pretty much won the game for Mike Cullen looked to be very harsh on Strokestown.
Yeah, I'd agree. And funnily, I watched the highlights back. They threw them up on social media there at the beginning of the week, and I'm sure the Strokestown lads were rewinding and playing and rewinding again, because I think it was Timmy Gibbons that came out and was pinged by John Gilmartin. Yeah, I think it was up there for me, maybe not quite as clear cut, but the famous one down here in Mayo we still talk about in 2016 when Evan Regan and Dennis Bastick, that free that Mayo didn't get to maybe win the All-Ireland in 2016. it was a big call because obviously Peter Cook takes the quick free, Sean Kelly scores a worldie, and Mike Cullen, don't look back. That's a free out to Strokestown. We could be looking at a penalty shootout. I don't think John Gilmartin had his best game. I think that's probably fair enough to say. I think a lot of the 50-50 calls did go against Strokestown. Now, it was a tricky game to referee as well, given the conditions and given the phenomenal amount of contact that was on play around the middle third in particular. Everybody was hanging out of everybody else. But that one, I think, will, they can feel aggrieved in Strokestown over that one, I think, yeah.
I mean, everybody's going to say now, Sean, that Mike Cullen will win the Connacht final against Turlestrand. I mean, maybe they will, but I mean, how dangerous will Turlestrand be, do you think, Mike, first? And
they're going in perfectly now, Mike, as well, aren't they?
Set up for the Sligo boys.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Now, I've seen Turlestrand a good bit over the last few years in the Connacht Club, and a man pointed out to me at the weekend, it's probably worth bearing in mind that Eamon O'Hara is not in charge anymore, because when Eamon was over them there for a few years, my God, they parked the bus and they left it parked, and some of their games now were tough watches. They like to play the game in their half of the field as opposed to the opposition half most of the time. Whereas Fergie O'Donnell now from Roscommon has taken over Turlestrand, and I gather they're playing a bit more expansive style of football. That would play into Mike Cullen's hands, you'd imagine, if they do come out and play, because very few teams are going to beat Mike Cullen in a shootout. I think we're all agreed on that. So I don't expect Fergie O'Donnell to go all-out attack, but he's going to have to find that balance. There's 7 in a row Sligo champions as well. These guys have been around, and without making the breakthrough to win a Connacht Club, one of these days they're going to get it done. And I think Mike Cullen, they will be forewarned now. Will Niall Welch be back? They could do with him. David Wynne will be back from suspension. Is Peter Cook going to be fit enough now maybe to come back into the team again? I'd expect Mike Cullen to win that Connacht Club final, but they need to address some of the issues that came up the last day. But obviously that's where Don Kennellan and Kieran Murphy and Maurice Sheridan and the lads will come into their own. So experienced, and you could see at the final whistle, I thought, on Sunday what it meant to them to win this, and obviously what it means to them now to try and go on and finish the job. So still the favourites, obviously, but yeah, I wouldn't be taking Turlestrand lightly.
Come here, we didn't bring you on to gloat, but now that you are on, we also want to get the opinion from Mayo on losing out in the junior and intermediate club championships as well. You were commentating on Dunmore against Ballyhonus, and with respect, 10 minutes into that second half, Ballyhonus are 1-6 to 1-3 up, playing with a gale. You'd have forgiven a lot of people in Dunmore for turning off the radio or switching off the stream and saying, well, that's that done, but you know what, we had a good old run at it. Where did Dunmore get this next 15 minutes from, where they outscored Ballyhonus into the breeze 8-0 and produced some of the best football I think any club has produced this year?
Well, I cornered a good Ballinrobe man, now of course a good Dunmore man, after the match on Saturday evening, Peter Walken, the Dunmore selector, and I asked him that very question. I said, 5 past, where did that come from? We of course, we know him down here as 5 past. No one calls him by his real name. And he said it was very simple. He said, when we got them in the dressing room at halftime, we said, lads, if we don't perform in the next 30 minutes, it's over. It's gone. We're out of the championship, because they were so poor in the first half. But he referenced one positional change that I think in hindsight did start to turn the tide. They put Conor Mitchell to centre back. They put Matthew Reddington into midfield, and Matthew Reddington had a big second half. He really started to throw his weight around. He got his hands on a lot of ball. Shane McGrath had a terrific second half as well. And they started to clean out Ballyhonus in the middle of the field. I know a couple of Ballyhonus selectors fairly well. They're hurting this week. They really are hurting this week, because they cannot figure out how they allowed Dunmore to take control around the middle. And they just couldn't turn it. Once the tide had turned behind Dunmore and they started to drive forward in waves, they couldn't turn it. I made it, I think, 8 Dunmore points without reply in 12 minutes. Like, that was absolutely
over. I mean, they didn't miss anything. McGrath, you mentioned Jamie Cohn, Costello. I mean, it was just an extraordinary return.
Yeah, it was wave after wave. Another big factor from a Ballyhonus point of view was, I actually asked afterwards, I thought Keith Higgins may have been carrying a knock or that, but he wasn't. But the Ballyhonus lads would feel that Dunmore had done their homework, and they had obviously targeted Keith, that he wasn't to be allowed to make runs, to get forward, to support the attack. That was executed to a T, as was their ability to stop Jack Coyne. Jack Coyne was man of the match in the county final. He's been called back into the Mayo squad. He's like a young Keith Higgins, really, in terms of how he plays the game. I thought it was very clever by Dunmore. Every time Jack Coyne looked like he was going to build up ahead of steam, they stopped him. They rotated the tacklers. They made sure that nobody was picking up more than a tick or a yellow at worst. And they just stopped that go-forward momentum, because Ballyhonus are all about carrying that ball out from the back. And Dunmore stopped them doing that in the second half. And again, I would probably say as well in hindsight, the goal that Ballyhonus scored early in the second half was the worst thing that could have happened to them, because it looked like mentally they switched off. As you said, Ollie, it looked like the goal's gone in. There's 20 minutes to go. It's a bad all evening. Ballyhonus have a wind. It's done. Nobody told Dunmore, though. and they just got stuck in. And 8 points in 12 minutes is some goal.
Did Conor Gleeson make a big save too?
He did. He's actually had a couple of really good games. Yeah. People give out about the goal that Kilconnelly got at the end of the county final, which I still think actually came back off the crossbar more so than Conor's hands. But it was such a pivotal error at that point in the game. But he hasn't done a thing wrong since. I mean, he's been absolutely excellent in the provincial championship, in Dunmore's 2 wins, and likewise a big save as well the last day when it was needed. So I suppose the question for Dunmore now is moving on to a provincial final no more than Mike Cullen. They've got the advantage now of having 2 weeks because Dominick's Knocknasheelan was called off, and that was a bit of shenanigans as well, Sean, last Sunday between this, that and the other about how that match wasn't played, or more importantly moved to the Connacht GA Centre. So whoever wins that will only have a week. So if it's Dominick's, it's going to be in Kiltoom. If it's Knocknasheelan, it'll be in Tuam. So that'll have a big bearing as regards Dunmore's hopes. But Mike, before we leave you, there was a third Galway Mayo clash at the weekend. It was Clifton against Island 80 up in Kenny Park. A close match between two very evenly matched teams. Now, we've seen Clifton a few times, and they're a really, really good junior team. And I suspect Island Eady were a really good junior team coming out of Mayo.
Yeah, they were indeed. Arguably down here, the junior championship is the hardest of the lot to win. Now, none of them are straightforward, but Island Eady beat Kilcommon in the county final. They have a lot of nice young players, and they were being talked up as, potential provincial champions, because Mayo have a very good track record in the junior. I think I make it Mayo have played in 6 of the last 10 Connacht junior finals. They've won 5. Kilmina obviously went on last year to go and win the All-Ireland. So Island Eady were coming from a good place. But from what I can gather, again, it was very similar to those other couple of games we referenced, Ballyhonus, Dunmore and Mike Cullen and Strokestown, in that it turned into a battle. Conditions were very, very difficult. It was tight. And Clifton managed to get the one goal that made all the difference. And I suppose the big disappointing thing from a Mayo perspective is the common thread throughout Westport, Ballyhonus and Island Eady's defeats is that Mayo club teams this season have struggled to get scores. They have struggled to get scores with the same ease or the same efficiency as the Galway champions. And this was a similar story for Island Eady. I was talking to a couple of guys who were up at the Island Eady game, and they said you wouldn't believe the amount of scores Island Eady left behind. Wides, dropped short, took the wrong options. So it has led to a bit of introspection down here about the style of football that teams are playing in the Mayo Club Championship, because it's so competitive. A lot of teams are setting up essentially not to lose or to get their defensive structures and defensive organisation right, and then we'll worry about maybe the more beautiful game, the more beautiful side of the game if we get out of Mayo. But obviously that hasn't really worked this time. But it has led to a bit of chatter, all right, that the Mayo forward lines in these club teams, they obviously just haven't put up the scores good enough to win games. And now you have Westport, Ballyhonus and Island Eady all falling at the first hurdle. So it's going to be another long winter down here, Ollie. Some things never change.
Mike, thanks a million for joining us.
Thanks,
Mike Finnerty there from the Mayo News.
No problem.
Every week, and of course he'll be commentating on the Connacht GA podcasts and streams as well, I'm sure, between now and the end of the provincial championships. But it's to the small ball we go, Sean. And we referenced at the top of the podcast just how good a hurling final we actually ended up having last Sunday between Loughrea and St. Thomas's. And I think we have to give credit to Loughrea because plenty of clubs have come and tried to take down Thomas's in a county final. Loughrea probably came closest of all.
Oh, they did, and you have to give them an awful lot of credit because they went at it. You know, this term that the game is played on one team's terms, it was played on Loughrea's terms, and to their management team and to the players in executing the plan, you'd have to say a hats off. And, you know, they were within an inch of getting the job done, and we're delighted to join maybe for an outside view of the Galway final on the podcast this afternoon is a man who was eagerly and enjoyed the game last Sunday by all accounts, Martin Kiley, who was covering the game for RT. Martin, first of all, it was a damn good game, wasn't it?
Well, I suppose, Sean and Ollie, I've been to a number of Galway finals over the years, and I think this was as good a final as I have seen for a very, very long time. It was a very raw day for hurling, that there was no doubt, and it's a huge credit must go to both teams. It was a very, very sporting game of hurling. Yes, there was the odd incident between it, but in overall, I think the referee did a fine job. It was a good game of hurling, and you know, I think it has whetted the appetite, and there'll be an even bigger crowd there next Sunday for this match.
The obvious question when there's a draw match and there's an underdog and a hot favourite is, did Loughrea leave it behind them, Martin? And of course, everyone is asking that in Galway this week as well.
Well, I suppose if you were Loughrea and you wanted the ideal start, well, you got it. You know, 3 points from Martin McManus in the opening 2 minutes. It was the ideal start. It was the foundation for the win, and I think I've been talking to a few people in Galway during the week about the match, and, you know, they're all going back to the fact that, you know, Thomas's won't start as poorly again. Maybe they won't, but I think when you look at the game overall, Loughrea played the better hurling. They were plucky when they needed to be plucky because the game looked gone for them when Éanna Burke got that goal. And, you know, I think both teams showed a huge amount of courage in different parts of that game, because I think any other team bar Thomas's would have gone out the gap a lot earlier. They stuck in there. They're worthy champions over the last 4 years. They'll want to win 5, of course, but I saw an awful lot of character in Loughrea. I see in them a team that are going to be around for a while.
The one thing I always notice as well, Sean, is the body language in the full-time whistle of a drawn match, because you do tend
You're trying to see who won the draw almost.
Exactly right, Sean. You always ask, did somebody win the draw?
Yeah.
And I just felt on viewing it that an awful lot of the Thomas's lads just fell to their knees. They couldn't believe it. Here's a full-time whistle in a county final, and for the first time we haven't won
it.
No, they haven't lost it, obviously. But Martin, do you put any stock in the fact that, okay, Loughrea will look back and have regrets about conceding the goal late on and maybe not getting the job done, but the very fact that they must take huge energy from the way they equalised that game and earn themselves another shot at it?
Well, that's what I was saying, Ollie, from the fact that I used the word plucky. They were exceptionally plucky to come back, because this game, you know, when you looked at it at that stage, when Éanna got that goal, you said, this is all over. You know, Thomas's have just done a Houdini act here again. They've come from being really poor at stages in the game to holding out and then go ahead for the first time in the game. So they were good, and, you know, I suppose Loughrea will ask themselves an awful lot of questions this week. What they did, nearly everything that the coach could ask of them on the day. Can they hold it? Can they improve on that? I think it'll be tough. It'll be really tough for them, because I was close to both dressing rooms after the game, but particularly the St. Thomas's one. And they looked to me like a team that said to themselves, you know what, we didn't play to our potential and we're still there.
And I suppose this week now, when we're in the era of video analysis of games, you can imagine the way this game has now been ate by the two respective management teams this week, right? Will you stick or twist now? An awful lot of things that Loughrea did really worked. I'm talking about matchups, right? Say Martin McManus got on to Fintan Burke, got 3 points off him, right? Thomas has reacted by putting Cian Mahoney on him. But the one that really intrigued me was Jamie Ryan has lit up the Galway Championship this year for Loughrea. He played at midfield. Thomas has went with John Head on him, which meant that David Burke played in the half-back line. Do they now go for broke and start Shane Cooney, who has, he's only coming back from injury? Do they ensure that David Burke stays midfield? Oisin Coyle did as good a job on Conor Cooney as you see. Conor Cooney was restricted to 1 point from play, was forced out the field. So this week, Martin, now, a lot of this management will be saying to themselves, do we stick with what worked, or can we bring another curveball?
Yeah, but I suppose one of the things I've seen over the years and being involved with teams is that there's always the danger, the risk of saying, "Oh God, what we did didn't work." I think you've got to kind of it's a gut from now on. You've got to see what has got you to where you're at. Now you referenced Jamie Ryan. He's a lot of talent, he's good hands, good ability. Personally, I think I'd be keeping him closer to goal. You mentioned David Burke. David didn't probably have the game that he would normally have. I think he's probably happier around midfield. And all of those sort of permutations will go on, but they'll go back to basics at the end of the day to win this championship match. And it won't be anything flashy. There'll be very little between the teams in the end, I feel. And it's about, hanging in there. And the question I suppose I'd have is, can Loughrea bring it for the second week in a row, the sort of performance they brought? Thomases will ask themselves the same questions as well, of course, but they have a lot of experience, and that is definitely going to count to them. I know you mentioned something to me after the game, Sean. What was this, their 7th county final? They're serious outfit.
Yeah.
And there are multiple examples around the country that you see, Martin, of one team dominating, be it a Ballygunner or Ballyhale, to give you the two obvious examples. And now Thomases are trying to kind of eke out their own 5 in a row and build their own platform for a tilt at an All-Ireland Club Championship. So I just wonder, was there any kind of thinking in St. Thomas's beyond Loughrea that they'll say no? But as regards looking at what's in the bigger picture, an Ulster team in an All-Ireland semi-final, a chance of getting back at an All-Ireland Club final, and here are these young upstarts from Loughrea coming in and nearly spoiled the party.
Yeah, look at I suppose from the outside looking in, and I talked to people around the country, and I was mentioning the fact that I was going to Galway for the county final, and said Loughrea, geez, they'd be hardy boys. Some of the lads were saying to me, and I suppose they've been that tag has been put on them. Maybe for some instances,
they're a very good hurling team, Martin, aren't they?
But that's my point. This is a different team. This is a really, really good team, a hurling team, a team that went to Pearse Stadium last Sunday with one thing in mind, and that was to hurl. And they certainly did that. And the foundations of that club are exceptionally strong. The love of the game is very strong there. What is it? They won in 2006 and 1941. Yeah. So I was there when they won it in 2006. And I saw then what it meant to them on that occasion.
When they won it now, but anyway.
Well, Ollie was, because he sent me an email earlier about it, and he said it was a very cold day like that Sunday.
It was. There was one shock and free late on, and I still think that there's a lot of questions to be answered. It's going to come up in the CCC, I think, one of the days.
Sure.
So I suppose ultimately then, this is the clash again of Loughrea. Can they bring this new vigour, this verve, this excitement, this hurling, and the hunger? And then you've got Thomases, who've obviously done it all, and what makes them keep coming back to the well time and again?
And in a week, Ollie, as we, Martin, we were just talking about Mike Cullen, and a week is a short time frame as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very, very short time. What can you do this week? Maybe they went down on Tuesday night and they had a few pucks or a few whatever. There's very little you can do. It's not what you do on the field this week will determine the outcome of the game next Sunday. I suppose it'll be determined by what goes on between the ears and the approach. And maybe, as Sean mentioned about the analysis, you can be crippled by analysis as well. And sometimes what you see on the video is not represented by what actually will happen on the day of the game, because video is great and video analysis is everywhere now. But I would certainly caution on it on some occasions whereby you can overanalyze, and therefore you put yourself into a situation of something that could happen, might happen, and then often it doesn't happen at all on the day of the match.
And I bet it's someone's job in Thomases and Loughrea to go back and look at Ballygar against Gahanna Mobilya Moylock in the junior final to see how John McMahon refereed that. Because we have a new referee, and that changed a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
That changes the dynamic, Sean, doesn't it?
Yeah, John McDonough's, it's a big game for him as well. And you can see, look at, there's been a lot of talk about the sending off, for instance, Merton, the last day. Seems to be a very harsh sending off, the second yellow, from what we saw at the time, and since that on video. Looks like a very harsh one. So look, at all of that can go into the mix. I suppose the other thing for a Galway team, it's almost unusual that whoever wins on Sunday, Merton, is out again in 3 weeks' time in an All-Ireland semi-final. And looking at that, I suppose we can't let you go without a quick word about the game last weekend, Ballygunner against Patrick Swell. I think at half-time, I was in Pearse Stadium, the Limerick champions looked to have the job done nearly. But Ballygunner, by all accounts, this second half was some showing.
Yeah, Ballygunner are a very, very serious team. Piercy, made a massive contribution, particularly in the first half. I think they might look back during the week and have some regrets as to, if they were playing it again, they might do some things differently. But overall, I think Ballygunner have shown themselves to be a serious team, a serious club that has won the intermediate championship in Waterford, that is building massive foundations at underage as well. And, while that is fantastic, you do like to see other teams coming to the fore. Na Piercy won the All-Ireland, the first club to win it in Limerick. That lifted an awful lot of boats in Limerick hurling, because the clubs began to focus on their development of their underage. And when you have new clubs coming, you have new players coming. And Galway have experienced that. In fact, early last Sunday morning, I met with Pádraig Kelly of Sarsfields, and it was brilliant to see him and his team making their way into the Salt Hill Hotel. They had their breakfast. He said, we're meeting later on in the day for a bit of dinner. And he said it was just lovely to come back after 25 years. And I think, just referring back, the programme, I think Michelle Healy did an excellent job on the programme last Sunday. I get to see a lot of programmes going around the country. It was a very, very well put together programme. And look, we're looking forward, Sean, to, I hope, will be another great game on Sunday.
Great stuff, Martin, and we look forward to having you in Pearse Stadium again. Martin,
and Ollie, did you notice that I was busy all morning painting the wall behind me so that it would at least correspond with the yellow behind you? It took a great deal of work, but I did it.
We thought it was actually your support for Loughrea, but we didn't want to say it. Yeah.
No. Look, I got an email late last night from Dylan to tell me make sure to paint that wall. So I'm not sure what colour yellow it is.
Always, Martin. Always.
Yeah, absolutely. And you look well in those branded t-shirts.
See you,
Martin, thanks a million.
Martin,
God bless, guys. Bye-bye.
Great soldier and a man. I suppose he does have the advantage of going around to so many different county finals and getting an overview of the standard, where we literally wait until we get into the business end. But that's an interesting point, Sean. Like 3 weeks' time, normally the Galway county finalists you can have a couple of months
you're
off.
parked, and the one thing we say for both of them this week, they've another week for say Shane Morgan didn't play for Loughrea, James Regan didn't play for St Thomas's. Is the week enough to get them further down the line? Then you're probably in their head, even though they can't say it, is you're going to be out in 3 weeks' time in an All-Ireland semi-final in one of them. So, do they hold either player for that? So it is a different time of thinking. Look, at obviously right now for both of them, all they want to do is win the Galway Championship. But there are doors opening here, and it's an intriguing thought to think that 3 weeks' time you could be in an All-Ireland final by Christmas.
We also have a big provincial final at the weekend for Killimer to look forward to as well.
Absolutely. And of course the
annual trip to Athlete.
But pity Desi O'Brien is the manager. His son Shane is part of the Loughrea team, came on last Sunday as well. So Desi will be on the line in that league, but there might be an old earpiece in as well. Maybe.
I think there is a half an hour of a difference. He might have a few minutes to spare to listen into the
but
first
best of luck to Killimer as well. Absolutely.
You'd fancy Killimer, would you? But again, it's very hard to make
predictions
this time of year.
Tory and Ollie are serious. They're going for 3 in a row of these. I think they've won. The last 5 or 6 years they've been the dominant team. We've seen them. They took care of 3 Galway teams. They're a very good hurling team. And, they have set their stall out. But the one advantage, I think, look, from the word go, there was something about Killimer this year in the Galway Championship. And they backed it up. They won the championship. But I think it's significant that they've got a bit of time in that they were able to get the celebrations out of the way, which they were absolutely entitled to.
Sure.
You know, it's been a long time. They're now back in the senior ranks in Galway, which is a huge fill up. That's what they wanted to do. But now they're able to kind of get their heads around the next step. So look, we wish them all the best of luck, but it will not be easy, I tell you.
No, it never is. But I just feel that Clymer are probably, since Ormo Murray, the best equipped.
And Athleague is a factor.
Right,
you said it tongue in cheek. Athleague is a factor. It's a tight pitch. You know, I often ask the question when you go down, would you play it somewhere else? This is their hurling ground, they say, but it is an advantage. There's no doubt, because it's hard to open up the game. But I'm sure, look at Jason Henry and Desiree Ryan, those lads, they'll know what they're at. And look at, we wish them the best of luck.
Yeah, we're looking forward to coverage of both of those games. And of course, the Kilkerran-Clonberne ladies, they're out on Saturday as well. They make the trip down to Friarfield. You've been in Friarfield at Dungarvan. What's that like?
It's decent enough, but again, you're looking at the weather down there. Apparently in Waterford, the weather hasn't been good as well. But what a trip! It's. I know it's home and away, isn't it, in ladies football, but it's a huge factor in terms of that. But look at, as we said a few times, they know how to do the gig, and we wish them the best of luck as well.
Kilkerran-Clonberne against Ballymacarbery is our live action on Saturday at 1:30. I mean, if I was in charge of Kilkerran-Clonberne, I'd be going down this evening. Acclimatise, get used to it all. Loads of other matches this weekend on Galway Bay FM, including under-19 finals across the board that we'll be bringing you updates on. So make sure you keep it here to Galway Bay FM.
And a preview tomorrow night again. We'll ask both Searles at 7 and 8 o'clock tomorrow night to give their opinions again. There
you have it. Sean has invited you all to tune in 7 o'clock tomorrow evening in this very studio with Cyril Donlan and Cyril Farrell as we continue the countdown to the replay of the Galway Senior Hurling Final. Thanks for watching.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh in association with Seymour's Loch Ray.